Hello, lovelies. This is 5 Minute Manifesting, and I'm your host, Lovey. Thank you so much for listening. I'm thrilled that you're here. And today I want to talk to you about taking full responsibility for your life, for the experiences of your life. So before we get into that, I do want to say when I tell you a little story about the first time I heard this advice, or the first time I'm cognitively aware of hearing this advice. It was in a book called The Success Principles by Jack Canfield. I think by that time I had already read The Secret, so I'd already been introduced to manifesting as a topic, but I was still learning about it. I wasn't regularly applying manifesting techniques or deliberately manifesting my life at that point. Um, but I wanted to improve and I wanted to be successful. And I had a strong desire to learn as much information as I could. And there's a chapter in the book, This is Success Principles, that is about taking full responsibility for your life. And I will tell you that the first time I read that book, that chapter made me incredibly angry. I mean, and I was almost triggered by it. Like it was almost just too much for me to bear that this person that wrote this book, Jack Canfield, would suggest that I was responsible for some of the things that had happened to me as a child. And that made me very angry. So what I want to caution you that you don't have to take it that far, right? Like you aren't responsible for other people's behavior. And if someone mistreated you in any sort of way, however those circumstances were, you don't have to take responsibility for their behavior. You do have to take responsibility for your behavior as best as you can, but absolutely hear me when I say this. Do not beat yourself up. Do not put your focus is what manifests, on whatever thing that you could have done differently or wrong or, happened in the past. Don't put your focus on their behavior. And I know that if you have had some trauma in your past, that could be really difficult. That could be easier said than done. Um, and like I said, when I first heard this in that book, I just absolutely was like, no, and refused to do it. So let's move on a little bit. As I read this book several times, right? Because I have a strong desire to be successful. I have a strong desire to learn about manifesting. That book isn't really about manifesting, but it has some sort of manifesting ideas in it. I do recommend it. I haven't read it in a really long time, so it could be outdated. I haven't read it recently, but I can recommend that it helped me at that point in time. But that chapter I found triggering for a while until at some point I was like, well, what if I just tried it? What if I just tried taking as much responsibility as I could for my life? As much as I could, as much as I could tolerate, as much as I wanted to take, right? Like, I'm responsible for the energy I bring to myself. I'm responsible for where I put my focus. I'm responsible for what I'm imagining. So I started trying it out. And it, I don't want to say more than anything else, it was just a game changer. When I started taking as much responsibility as I could for any given circumstance, for any part of my life, and saying, like, okay, if I want something different, then I need to select or create or choose, whatever word you want to put on it, manifest something different for myself. Absolutely. That's what I need to do. I am the operant power. I am the one that's responsible here. And the more I started putting my attention and focus there, the better things got for me. The better manifester I became, more successful I became in my life. So I'm sharing this with you today to say, one, it really does work. You are the operant power. The second thing I want to say is if you're listening to this podcast today about taking responsibility and you are feeling angry or triggered, I've been there. I completely understand it. You do not have to explain that feeling to me. So, what I would suggest to you in this moment is just sit with that. Just accept that that's where you are. That maybe you're in this victim sort of mentality, this victim place, And maybe rightly so. Maybe you have been mistreated. But even if you have, you can't stay there forever and still manifest exactly what you want and still be the operant power and select the future you want, the right now that you want. You can't do it. I absolutely believe that that's true, that you can't. And so if you have some anger or you're triggered by this information about taking full responsibility, that's okay. You can work through it. You cannot believe me. You are the operant power. But if you are there, I urge you to take another listen to this episode in the future. I urge you to really sit with those feelings and figure out where they're coming from. Do not beat yourself up. Do not, I would even suggest maybe the people that mistreated you, don't beat them up in your imagination. Find out what baby steps you can take towards taking responsibility as much as possible. And don't blame yourself. Don't dwell on anything negative for a super long time and say, like, well, this is my fault. I deserve this. Even if it's now, even if you're manifesting a specific person and they're not talking to you, do you take responsibility for selecting what you want? But don't beat yourself up for creating a circumstance wherein they're not talking to you in this moment. You absolutely, maybe that's the bridge of incident. We don't know. You absolutely can get exactly what you want. So I just wanted to share that with you today. Thank you so much for listening, and may you manifest exactly what you want.